All right. Hello, everyone. You guys all here for the React workshop? Otherwise, you guys probably would have left. So how many guys did the pre-work document? Or actually, let me ask, how many guys didn't do it? No one? Okay, so you guys all got there. In that pre-work document, there was an extra section at the end that said if you guys are interested, you guys can learn a little bit about vanilla web development, which is just using plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Did any guys read that? A little bit. It was a little bit hidden. Okay. Just want to make sure because I want to be on a playing field with everyone and make sure everybody, some of you guys are first year, some of you guys are second year, some of you guys are probably more. So we're going to start out with the basics. This is going to be like intro. And the point of this is I want you guys to understand the theory behind React. Depending on how much time we have, we'll see how much live coding we can get done. There is a list of things that I want to do. Once again, it's all up to time and really how lost people get. If you guys are like looking really lost, please raise your hand, let me know, stop me. Because I want to make sure everybody, it builds on itself. So that's the biggest thing. Okay, there's another link here. If you can see it, it's the same URL, but at the end of it, there is a starting out with React. This will be pretty much some of the content that I'm going to be talking about today. I have like a bunch of variations of this kind of talk, but it's custom made for every single like skill level. So we'll have to see how this thing goes. I haven't done one with such a big group of intro students, so it's going to be a little bit tough. All right, so how many guys know what front-end development is? Some of you guys? You guys familiar with web development in general? Web development has two parts, right? It's going to have a front-end development and a back-end development. Our focus here today is going to be only front-end. And if you guys are going to Zot Hacks, there's going to be another introduction to web development talk. And that one's going to talk about both front-end and back-end, except the front-end is not going to cover React, which is what we're going to do here today. Okay, and it'll also tell you how to connect stuff. In our cases, for our live coding, I'm going to be hard coding a backend, which is literally, I can show it to you guys. This is our entire backend. It's literally just an array of dictionaries, objects. Also, everybody here knows Python, correct? Does anybody not know Python? No. Okay, cool. So I'll be sticking with Python. So that's the language you guys are most familiar with. But yeah, let's get started. So the web has been around for 30 years. For some of you guys, that's a long time. For some of you guys, that might not seem like a lot. But that means, the technology that's built on the web has been the same since 1989 when Sir Tim Berners-Lee first came up with the web. So HTML is 30 years old. And 30 years ago, the computers were doo-doo. We had about maximum 100 kilobytes of RAM on these computers. And, when you opened up a website, you were opening up HTML on that computer. So you have to understand that HTML is a little bit old. And that means that, the way that it was designed and all these programming languages designed for the web, it's also old. And now today, websites are completely different, right? You have moving pieces. You have, some of them have 3D models. Some of them have a lot of weird, stuff that's flying across the page and all that kind of stuff. That's all possible today because our computers are better. And because our computers are better, well, the language that we're writing with also needs to evolve. And that's why we have React today. Okay, so on this slide, I have a bunch of examples that are kind of explaining why we have them. But let's just go ahead and go with a quick analogy. It's a little bit, I think, inaccurate, but I think it's a good way to explain why we have React. So artificial intelligence and machine learning is a really, really complicated thing. It has a lot of complex computations. So the question is, why are all of our top AI ML researchers using Python, right? When, everybody knows that Python is pretty slow, right? Why aren't they using C++ and getting the most, yeah, exactly. But the question is, why wouldn't they just code it in C++? Because you can definitely do it in C++ as well, correct? So the question is, why not just do it in C++? The answer is because AI and ML researchers have better shit to do. Why are they spending their time managing pointers? Some of you guys might not have even touched pointers. It's a nightmare, and the other people who have will attest to that. So, they got better shit to do, spending the time researching things like, what the heck is going to push the boundaries of machine learning, not I got a seg fault, I'm leaking memory somewhere. That's not what they want to worry about, okay? And React is kind of like the same way. When we are front-end developers, right, web developers, our job is not really to worry about how to change text on the screen. We're going to say, okay, we want this thing to do this, this thing to do this. We're going to create these beautiful web components, but we don't really want to bog ourselves down with how to achieve these effects, okay? I'm going to show you a quick example of how React is a little bit different from traditional web development. And the syntax might be scary for some of you guys who haven't, touched HTML before. But the point here isn't going to be the syntax. It's going to be more about the concepts. And I want to make sure I'm good on time. So 7:20. All right, cool. So imagine we have a website and it looks atrocious. I know there's no CSS, but on the very top, you have some text. It says old data, right? And then below it, there's a button. When you click on that button, it's going to change that text to change data. It's revolutionary, I know. So let's go ahead and take a look at this code here. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you guys can all see. All right, so this is the way you would do it in traditional web development, okay? And then this is also the way that they'll be going over in the Zot Hacks workshop. And for the purposes of a hackathon, if this is your first time working with web development stuff, this is a fine solution, because what you'll see is you're explicitly telling them what to do, right? Whereas React will implicitly do it for you. And if you're a beginner, might actually be a good thing, because then if you want to track a problem, you can figure out, you have the steps in front of you, right? Whereas if something is just happening and you don't know why it's happening, you're going to be lost. But anyways, so let's take a look at the differences, okay? So in regular HTML, we have, a div that says old data here, and notice what happens in our button, right? As soon as the button gets clicked, we do two things. First, we find the HTML element that we want to change, and then we change it. Notice how these instructions are very explicit, okay? This is called imperative programming, if you guys ever heard of it. In React, though, however, it's going to be a little bit different. We have a variable here, but in React, it's called state, and I'll explain how to use this later. But instead of, look at line 4 here compared to line 1 up there, right? We don't have the actual text old data there. We have a variable there instead. And what happens in our button when we click it, it should be actually capital. Oops. When you click it, it's going to change the variable, not the HTML element itself. Okay, and this is very important, because what happens is we're changing data. We're not changing the actual HTML web element, okay? And so why is this important? This is the core of React, where you have data that changes, and React will literally react to those changes for you. That's why it's called React, okay? So it takes care of all of these things about worrying how to change the element and all this kind of stuff for you. And, you're looking at this code example, you're like, dude, this is stupid. I'm writing more code for no reason, right? But what if we thought about a more advanced use case? Because React is developed by Facebook. They're using this for a reason. If any of you guys use Facebook, boomers like me, you probably, or I guess it's called Meta now. But if you're using Facebook, there has been a recent redesign in like the last year. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. That new website is completely written in React. The old one was written in PHP. So Facebook came up with this framework called React, and let's try and figure out why this is good. So imagine how Facebook works. Okay, so when you log onto Facebook, you have a news feed, and that news feed is really just your website going to the Facebook servers, and it's saying, yo, my name is so-and-so, give me a list of posts that maybe my friends have that might interest me, right? And so what happens is the Facebook servers are going to go to the database, and they're going to do all their fancy schmancy algorithms and stuff, and then they're going to send us back the data. Okay, and for example, if you guys are familiar, I want to make sure, are you guys all familiar with Python dictionaries, like that format? All right, cool. So we get back an array, and this array is going to be full of post items, right? So imagine every newsfeed has a bunch of, or every newsfeed item has a bunch of data. Who is making the post? Contents of the post, likes, comments, all that kind of stuff. This is a simplified version, but it's going to look something like this. Okay, this format is called JSON, and it's very similar to Python dictionary. So if you understand that, you'll pretty much understand this. And the question is, how would we display this? Okay, So let's just imagine that we actually made a call to our database, and I'm gonna just code up something really quick for you guys, just so you guys can see. Imagine we have an HTML file here, and what do we do? So let's say we have a div ID equals root, and we close this div, and we're gonna put a new line here. All right, so let's say, how do we display, this data? And like I said earlier, as front-end developers, your job is to really convert raw data into meaningful visual components, right? That's pretty much what it is. When you access your database, you're getting back raw data like this, and it looks like, an array full of dictionaries. So it's literally pure data. Your job is to take this raw data and put it in a way that's meaningful to users. When someone goes on Facebook, whether it's a 6-year-old kid, okay, no, 6-year-old kid shouldn't have Facebook, but if you're like a 17-year-old kid, that was a little bit high, or if you're an 80-year-old grandma, you should all be able to access this interface. It should be intuitive. If you give them all of this shit and they're like, dude, what is this? Author colon, I don't get it, right? This ugly. You can print this out and it'll still work, but you're failing your job as a front-end developer. So that's our job. We're going to convert this data into something beautiful. Now, how do we convert this data into HTML elements? The traditional way we would do it is we would say, well, we're going to loop through the data, let I equal to 0, I must be less than data.length, yada, yada, I plus plus. And then maybe we would have document get element by ID, root dot inner HTML, and we would do like plus equals, and then we could dynamically add some HTML. So for example, we would have a div here, /div, h2, and we would have, for example, this would be data of I dot author. I think that's fine. And then we have a new line here, and it's going to be a paragraph tag p, let's just say content for now. Okay, so what does this do? This is a loop that will loop through all of our data, and for every item in this data array, we're going to generate some HTML and plug it inside this document.roots, or the element by ID roots. So what would it look like in the end? You originally have this blank empty HTML. After you run this code, you literally generate 3 of them, and it's not formatted, but it's okay. And it'll replace every single one of these with what? Data of I.author. The first one is Brian, and then the second one is Susan, and the third one is Skylar. Does this kind of make sense? Just the concept of it. This makes sense? So that's kind of what you're doing, right? But so if you were writing Facebook, obviously it would look probably a little bit more complex than this, but this is the general idea behind it, right? You're transforming data and all this stuff. So I still don't see the use case for React. Okay, so why would I want to use React? Well, imagine this. What if one of these posts, let's say Susan is super popular and all of a sudden, boom, she's got 6 likes. Popular kid, right? So, wait, why did it say I'm Billy Bob? Okay, I'm Susan. So imagine her post gets another like. We should update that in the user interface, correct? So now we need to do this entire thing again. So how do we do this? We can have a function here, call it update, and then we can call this update function every time some data gets changed. But is this efficient? Does this make sense? Why are we re-rendering all of these things? Because look, so before we do all this, anyways, we have to first clear it. .get. I'm just going to copy and paste this. We need to first remove everything here, set it equal to nothing, and then rebuild the entire document, right? We have to rebuild the newsfeed every time we get an update. Does this make sense for us to render everything? No. But even then, it's still fine. But then you got to think about it. Facebook has an infinite scrolling newsfeed. You're going to have hundreds of elements, right, in this one newsfeed. And if one post gets another like, you need to re-render everything. And then what if 2 posts are getting liked at the same time? Then you're going to render the entire thing twice. All right, another comment that's coming in. It's going to be constantly re-rendering, and it's going to look absolutely ugly. So what do we need to do? We need to specifically find a way to edit only one element, right? If only this first thing is getting liked, or only if Susan's post is getting liked, only this one element should be changed. So how do we fix that? We're going to have a mapping. We're going to have to map every single one of these data objects to their corresponding HTML. And then let's say you're going to want to update something. You want to comment on a post. So let's say I want to comment on Susan's post. Well, then this thing should have a unique handler that only attaches to this thing back. So it's going to go back and forth and go back and forth. Dude, I'm lost. I'm confused. Okay. And I've been doing this for a long time. So see how complex it gets when you want to manage. You kind of want to keep your data and the actual web components in sync is kind of what it is, right? You want to be able to attach them properly. But, you know, like how AI, ML researchers don't really do memory management, we don't want to do this shit either, okay? So this is where it comes in React. Now, when should I use React? Always. All right, so skip that. I know it said there's more stuff, but just assume always. If you want to ask me more about that later, there's other libraries, but you should always try and use a framework. Okay, let's actually get some coding done. Let's see if I have enough. Okay, I'm gonna run through a quick traditional web development style website. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with basic web development, those 5 minutes will teach you everything, hopefully. And then once we get that, then we can jump into React. So let's hope everything goes right. Live coding is always a pain. One time I was doing this and my code editor did not open up. And I was like, dude, I prepared for everything except for this. All right, so let's go ahead and let's call this, I don't know, DBH. All right. So I'm gonna have this folder called DBH. I'm gonna open this up. Boom, it's completely empty, it has nothing. So I'm gonna open this up, this empty code folder in my favorite IDE, which in this case is VS Code. Okay, how do I do traditional web development? New file, index.html. You create an HTML file, okay? In VS Code, there's something called emit tags. Exclamation mark, enter, boom, it generates boilerplate code. You don't need to worry about what any of this stuff means because I promise you, when I click on this file and I open this up with Firefox, there's nothing because all this stuff is just boilerplate code gibberish, except for this thing. This thing says document. We can change this to hello. And then you'll see that in the very top, once I refresh this page, that tab gets changed to hello. So everything in the head part of this HTML is just corresponds with metadata, information about this site. For example, there's another one that's like, I don't know the exact code, but it's like meta content equals to description or something. And then that will show up when you go on Google. Oh, this is risky. I'm gonna Google something, React. Okay. So notice how does Google know what to display in that section, right? That's part of the meta. You'll find that stuff in the meta. Yeah, okay. So anyways, everything in the head is just gonna be information about the site. It doesn't actually show up. So all the code that we're gonna be writing is gonna be in the body. Okay, and hello, and I have resources for explaining every line of code in this boilerplate somewhere. I'll share it with you guys later, just remind me. All right, so if I say hello here, boom, it prints out hello. If I print 2 plus 2 here, it's going to literally print out 2 plus 2. And this is something to keep in mind. HTML is not a programming language, and this is not an insult, okay? 2 plus 2 literally gets translated because HTML stands for hypertext markup language. Not a programming language. It's like a glorified PDF. Just think of it like that. Okay. So there are 3 languages that we have with web development: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML, I like to say, provides the content and the structure of our website. Let me make this bigger for you guys. Ooh. Okay. So it provides the content structure and structure for our website. What does that mean? Well, if I have 2 plus 2 here, it's literally going to print out 2 plus 2. That's the content. If I have any text here, it's going to display accordingly. Now, let's say I have a button tag. Boom. Okay. And inside here, it's going to say, click me. And it has an exclamation mark because I'm so enthusiastic about this. So look, there's a button here. And more specifically, there's text inside of the button. Why? Because we said between the opening and closing tags of this button, click me. Okay, this is how HTML denotes structure. In this case, the content, this text goes inside of the button. If I put it on the outside, it's outside of the button. Now, you're like, dude, I can see it. Like, you don't need to tell me this stuff, but understanding that, what comes before, this structure of what comes before, what comes after, what goes inside. This is literally how you make every single website with structure, okay? Now, the next thing is CSS. And I'm not going to go into this thing at all, mainly because it just makes things pretty. That's the whole point of CSS, okay? And I'll go through like really quickly how you would do this. There's other resources for this, so I'm not going to waste your time with this. Type tag/CSS, href, style.css, and literally all CSS is it has the exact same syntax where you have something called the selector, and then it has property and value. So for example, I want to set the background color to green, and I want to set the text color to red. Okay, this is going to look atrocious, but Merry Christmas, guys. So this button says click me, and it's styled like that. Okay, this is all CSS is. All CSS will look like this. In fact, it's going to pretty much look like a bunch of these. You're going to have a bunch of different selectors and a bunch of different styles for all of them. As for how do you learn CSS, I get this question a lot at hackathons. It's literally just practice. See how I just like came up with background color and color? Like this is just from practice, right? So I know like if I see anything on a website, I'm like, okay, I want a box shadow, 1px, 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 and 5px and black. And I know what every single one of these numbers mean. So this is x offset, y offset, spread radius, and no, blur radius and then spread radius. Or you can just Google MDN, box shadow, boom, and it'll tell you what every single one of these numbers mean. Again, this is just practice. So there's no other way to know this except for practicing, which also means I'm not going to go into this. And for the majority of this code demo, everything's going to look kind of ugly, but who cares? So the last part is JavaScript. Script source equals 2, and I want to make sure we still get React in. Okay, so script.js / script. And then we can go ahead and create this. Now, notice our button, when we click it, as atrocious as it looks, it does not do anything, right? And the reason why is because we have not attached any functionality to it. That's where JavaScript comes in, okay? So what we can do is we can add an on click like this, and we can make it do something disgusting, like alert, hello. Oh, this is not gonna work. I'm gonna use different codes. Hello, save, boom. We click on this button, boom, it prints out hello. Okay. Yeah, that's web development. Oh, let me do this. Let me put this inside here. So function, it's gonna call clicked, boom, and we're gonna alert hello or SDF, whatever. Here's. And then this is how you would just say SDF, call this function. Everything inside these quotes gets executed as JavaScript, so it's not actually HTML, it's JavaScript. Boom. Okay, well, wait, what did I call it? Oh, I called it click. Nobody said anything. That's messed up. This made me look like an idiot. All right, so now I click it, boom, it generates SDF. Congratulations, you guys have all learned web development. Is there any questions on basic traditional web development? There might be a lot. I'm gonna give you guys like 5 seconds, and I'm just gonna scan the room, and I'm gonna come back to make sure everybody's all on the same page. Oh, okay, cool. All right. Yeah, that's not what you guys are here to learn. So, but we have to know this before we can get into React. Now, let's go ahead and get into React. Ooh. We're gonna go ahead and create a new folder. Actually, you know what? Let's just do this. npx create React app. Are you guys laughing at my folder names? Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and execute this command. npx create React app, and I'm gonna put in a folder name. Although if you can create a folder and then go inside it and use the dots, like I said in the second doc. But yeah, this is a command that literally installs not just React, but everything else that you need for a production level web development. So it sets up Webpack and Babel and a bunch of other stuff that you don't need to worry about. But essentially, it like compiles down your code and makes it pretty, makes it polyfill. So it supports previous generations of browsers and all that kind of stuff. So it's a production level thing, but the reason why we're using it is so that we can just jumpstart into React. So I'm going to go ahead and call this folder dbh React. All right, and then it's going to run the command. It's going to say this might take a couple of minutes, but since I already have done this a billion times, it should be cached on my computer, and it should be relatively quick. Let's see how fast it is. And if it internet just breaks in the middle of this, we should be good. Oh, true. That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm doing this in terminal, but you guys can all do this in the React or in the VS Code terminal, which is also what I wrote in the other thing, because that one's easier to do. Let me go ahead and get that started. So if you are here, let's do this. I'm going to open up a, let's do this again. Let's do a new folder and we'll call this dbh react 2. All right, and then we're going to go inside dbh react, oops, not this one. We're going to go inside dbh react 2, and I'm going to open this up in VS Code. So this is just opening up a folder in VS Code. You guys can do this by literally like finding the file or the folder, and then you like open with whatever. I don't know how you guys do it on Windows, but you guys can open up a blank folder in VS Code, correct? Yes? All right. Now, there is a, okay, there's apparently a pop-up here that says new terminal. You can do this, and it'll pop up a new terminal somewhere. And if you are on Windows, Lord help your soul, but I think there is a way to pick PowerShell, I think. Or if you guys followed the steps of installing Git Bash, you can also do the exact same thing. But the point is, can you guys all open the terminal in your VS Code and somehow? And you should all be able to type npx create react app dot in there. That should work on both Windows and Mac. Doing ls and cd and that kind of stuff, that's like Unix only, but you should be able to run this command if you have node and npm installed. Do any of you guys not have that by any chance? Yeah. Oh, yes. It can ask you if you want to proceed. Yeah. You want to proceed. But yeah, other than that, I guess. Also, everyone's gonna have issues with this. So I've been to about 40 maybe hackathons now, and for now I just do mentoring for hackathons. But 90% of the time I spend helping people is setting stuff up. This is the biggest pain in the world. Sometimes they'll just have like some weird folder thing where they install and it installs recursively in itself. So every time you click it, install, it just keeps installing and it doesn't actually work. Yeah, this is the biggest issue. So if you guys feel really scared from just installing it, don't be. Coding is actually easier than setting this stuff up. Everybody has different computers. Everyone has different systems and all that kind of stuff. There is also an online React. Maybe I should just do this. Let me see if I can pull this up really quick. Online React editor. There's one from React itself. Somewhere it's not worth it. Okay, never mind. So there is an online thing that can work if you guys want to work around with that. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and get started on just explaining this stuff. You guys can figure this stuff out on your own. I'm going to keep this server open a little bit. How do I make this smaller? Oh, here. Okay. So I'm going to keep this up. I'm going to explain what's going on in these folders here, okay? Because it should have automatically generated a bunch of folders. The first one is node modules. Do not open this folder. It will crash. Okay, well, mine's fine. But notice how there's a bunch of folders in here that you don't know what it is. It's not malware, okay? This is why we use npx create react app. It sets up all of these packages that you might need for a production level environment, and it puts them all here. It manages all of your packages for you. So this is why working with packages is very, very simple in JavaScript, because you can just have npm. If you guys are familiar with Python, it's like pip, but better in some ways. So we have a package.json. What's the equivalent in Python? Requirements.txt. So if you guys use a virtual environment, it's like that, but it does a little bit more. So the main thing is that it has a list of the dependencies that you're using. In this case, these are the ones that we really care about: React, React DOM, and React scripts. And this is all the stuff that it downloads for us. But if you wanted to manually download it, so if you created, a React problem from scratch, you would do npm install React, and then boom, it's going to install React. And I don't want this to happen, so I'm going to cancel that. But yeah, so this is like, it does all these things for you. We don't actually care about these, but we won't worry about that. What else? Browsers list. This is just like telling you what it's going to polyfill for. So it'll say like, this will support every browser version that has a greater than 0.2% of the population, whatever. We don't care about that. We don't actually care about any of this, to be honest. This is just information. You'll edit this on later on when you get better at this stuff and you actually know what's going on. But for now, just don't touch it. Any commands, if you want to add packages, to remove packages, do that through the command line. You're going to do npm install whatever the package name, and then it'll work. Okay, cool. Now there's two folders here, public and source. I'm going to delete a bunch of stuff so I don't cloud you guys with this information, since a lot of this doesn't matter. The only thing that does matter in our public folder is this index.html. Now, we saw earlier, when you open up a website, you're opening up the index.html. Same thing here. We're opening up specifically this index.html. It's inside the public folder. The name public is very important. Don't change it. It'll boom something. All right. So now if we look at this, there's a bunch of comments. I'm going to get rid of this. But if you look at this, this looks very, very similar to the code that I wrote, correct? Earlier, or the one I didn't really write. I put an exclamation mark, but notice how it's roughly the same thing. And in fact, the body has nothing, but except for these two things. And I said earlier, like, our entire website is going to be inside the body, right? So how can React have absolutely nothing? Well, it doesn't have nothing. It has something called a div ID equals root. And if you remember earlier, you can directly inject like HTML code using JavaScript into things that have an ID onto them. And that's what React does. And we don't really touch the HTML at all, because React, like I said earlier, React handles a bunch of all of the what's called DOM manipulations, which is, messing around with the web stuff. React will handle this for us, so we don't touch any of this. React will generate HTML elements for us without us knowing. Don't worry about this, okay? But this functions like a regular HTML file, and all of the code and development that we're going to be pretty much working on is going to be in the source folder. Okay, this is the important part. And these are not, so I'm going to delete these. The first thing that's important is index.js, and I'm going to get rid of this just because it's pointless. It's just a strict mode. But anyways, this is all that matters here. I'm going to get rid of all this extra code. All right, boom. This is the base of React. You're only going to use this once in every React project, usually. So you don't need to memorize this, and create React app. The command that we just used will automatically generate this for you, so you don't need to worry about this. All you need to really know is like what the heck it's doing. It's calling the React DOM library, something that you don't need to do, and it's going to call this .render, and it's going to render this thing called app inside. And so this is the first parameter of the function, and here's the second: document.get element by ID root. We saw this earlier. So all it's saying is we're going to render this component inside here. So what the heck is app? App is, if we actually click on it and see, it says import app from app, and I can do command click. I don't know about Windows, maybe it's control click or alt click. So you can actually follow the file, but if you look on the side, it's right here in the source, app.js. And it's doing this kind of like HTML-like tag. Okay, this is called JSX in React, and you can think of it as HTML on steroids. That's all it is. So that's why it has like an HTML-like structure. Okay, one thing to note, this is a custom component, a custom React component, so it has to be capital letters. You remember when we were writing HTML, div and p tags were all lowercase. Okay, that's how you know it's regular HTML. If it's uppercase, it's React. All right, so we're gonna import app from React, or app from app, which is actually app.js, but you can leave off the .js, it'll automatically know what you're talking about. And we're gonna render this. Okay, and let's actually look at app here. Okay, so app is actually a little bit complicated. I'm gonna get rid of this image because this is annoying. Okay, so look at all we have for app, and I'm gonna make this a little bit lower. Actually, let's just run this first. So the way you would run a test server is you do npm run start, and you can Google these like start commands and stuff. But yeah, essentially it will open up a local test server, and this local test server is very helpful for us because it does a lot of things, but most importantly, it has hot reload, right? Notice when I was doing traditional web development, I had to go back and refresh the page and refresh the page. This will automatically carry our changes while maintaining the state. We can worry about that later. All right, but let's see how we actually code React, okay? Because this thing is automatically generated, but it generated this thing called app, and it's written like this. So what is app? It says here that app is a function, okay? And this is like a regular JavaScript function, except the return type is something that looks like HTML. But like I said earlier, it's JSX, okay? But it looks a lot like HTML. And the way I want you guys to think about it is essentially when React starts, it's literally going to call this render function. The first thing it does, it's going to call this render function, and it's going to say, okay, it wants me to render app into the HTML. Okay, I'll do that. I'll go ahead and render app. What is app? It goes to take a look at app. Boom, app returns. It's going to execute this function, and it returns HTML. So it's going to literally do something like this. So it's because app returns all of this, so it's pretty much just a substitute for this. Okay, and this will be directly generated or inserted into the index.html root item. Okay, so that's how I want you guys to think about how React does it. And you'll see why this is so powerful is that we can now break our code down into components, right? So the idea is before we only had one index.html file, and that's all you're allowed. You're not allowed to have imports in HTML. So now what we can do is, look, we have this app, and let's go ahead and create a new custom component. And you'll see the benefits of having this. So for example, let's call it like, I don't know, news. Let's call it post or something, post.js, okay? And similar to the other app, it's a function, and since the component has to start with capital, post has no parameters yet, and it's just going to return a div. How about that? Simple. And it's going to say hello or something. Save this, and we go back to app, and I'm going to clear out all of this stuff. Oh, one last thing, I have to export it, and then you can follow this format for all of them. Export defaults post. Okay, we're going to go back to our app.css or app.js, and then we're going to import post from post, and every single React tutorial online will show exactly this line of code, so you don't need to like worry about memorizing it for now. But essentially, it's like this. I just create a post, and I'll just write it in like HTML like syntax so you guys can kind of not be too confused. But now I've inserted a post in my app, and if I refresh this, boom, it says hello. It's really, really small, but if I zoom in, it says hello. And what's powerful about this is that this is reusable. What does that mean? I can generate a bunch of these, and it prints out hello a bunch of times, right? So can you see how this might be useful for Facebook, right? And before we actually go into implementing that, why don't we go ahead and pass in a parameter? Because post we call it a component, but this is just a JavaScript function, right? And every function can take in parameters. So for example, maybe this can take in something like, we'll just call this data, and we can pass in something like text, or text equals to something like this. And what we can do is, if there's data, we can go ahead and display it in here. So we're going to say data.text. Actually, I'm going to use a spread syntax. This is easier. So you can add curly brackets here, so it extracts out the thing, so we can directly just put text. Oops, let me go back here. Text. Okay, and I should do this for every single one of these. So notice that when I Oh God, this looks gross. But if I do this, it will kind of call this like a JavaScript function, right? If there's a different parameter that's passed in, it'll execute differently. Okay, and this is, you can see how, imagine this is like a news feed and you have news feed items, right? Every single post has different content. You can dynamically pass in different content. Like, let's say you had an array of data. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at access my Facebook database, copy that, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this into here. So I have this variable called data, and it's an array of a bunch of stuff. And what I can do here is I can directly put inside here data.map every item. And I know this is extremely confusing for some of you guys, but I will explain all this in just a second. So text equals to item dot, what is it called? Post. And so now with, where is it? It's here. Wait, it's not. Let me go ahead and first hide this. I go here and I undo that. Okay, cool. Okay, well, we can't see where it starts and ends, but you can kind of see how what I essentially did was I looped through all of the data into here, and then I spit out a different post item with its corresponding post content. Okay, and it just spits out a different one for every single one of them. And okay, so this is like how you can generate stuff really quickly, really fast. Does this part make sense to everyone? Even though syntax-wise it might not. Does the concept make sense to you guys? Yeah? Question?
Wait, can you go to your Post.js?
Sure.
I want to see what that is.
Let me go, oops. Let me do this. Boom. Okay. Let me zoom out a little bit. So function, it takes in one thing to keep in mind, there's curly brackets around that text.
Oh, yeah, and for myself, like I noticed that when I deleted those specific like files that were like irrelevant to this, they caused some errors. So like, is that like why?
Okay, it might have caused some errors because it was importing certain things because they were there beforehand.
Yeah.
I only deleted them because I knew what was using them because the boilerplate is the same. But later on, I can take a look at your thing.
Oh no, I just restored those files.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So some things are being imported. So as soon as that's one of the good things that of React is that if there is like something wrong with the code, it will just not run, which is good because in traditional web development, HTML will just render even if there's errors in the code and it will try its best to look nice. So that's why sometimes you'll see some really messed up websites. There's no compile errors, there's no runtime errors or anything like that. But in React, there is. They try to catch as much stuff as they can. But yeah, okay, you guys are good for now? All right. I said earlier that there's a concept called state in React, and this is important because React state is literally how React knows when to update things, okay? So rather than having just a random variable here, I'm gonna extract this and I'm gonna put this all inside a state. And the syntax for this is kind of confusing, but I'll try and make this as simple as possible. So first we have to import something called use state from React, okay? And we're going to set a variable name, and we'll call this like data or something, equals to use state. Okay, and then inside this parentheses, it should be a default value. So we're just going to pass this in here. And one thing is use state returns an array. And this array has two items every single time. The first one is the actual value, and the second one is a function to set the value. Okay, now I want you guys to understand that this is just a variable. So why are they making it so complicated to set and use this variable? The reason why is because React needs to know when data is being changed so they can react to it appropriately. That's why I have to go through this process, okay? And you'll see every single tutorial, every single code tutorial online follow this exact same syntax. So I promise you guys won't get lost once you guys actually learn this stuff. I just want you guys to understand the concepts for now, okay? So the first part is going to be the actual data, and we can call this variable whatever we want. But the second part is going to be called sets, and then that same variable name. So now instead of data here, I can use content, and it should do the exact same thing, right? Except this time React is hooked into this state. They're always listening to the state. They will always know whenever something gets changed. So if I go ahead and have a button here, and I add like an on click, and it takes in a function, and this function is going to set the content equal to the previous content with a new item. Let's put it at the front. And I know you guys are a little bit confused with the syntax, but once again, it's the content that matters, or the concepts. Give me a name, Jim. And then he's gonna say like, yo. All right, cool. That's perfect. What the heck just happened? We have a error here. Oh, it should be an array. My apologies. So it's going to look a little bit like this. Holy moly. 1, 2, 3. I might just rewrite this. This is annoying. So we have a button here. It should say click something, and then it takes in this. Oh, it takes in this. And then it passes in this. Yeah, I'm going to rewrite this. So we take this out. Set content is a function. Oh, that's what it's missing. It's missing this. Okay. And then we're going to call set content here, and it's going to add in a new author and a post of this. And then after this, it's going to have the previous content. Oh my goodness, that actually worked. Okay, cool. And when I click this button, everything broke. Okay, so give me 1 second. Let's take a look what we did here. What is this error? Content.map is not a function. Oh, this should be inside array brackets. Did I get this correctly? It should be inside here. Holy, if I got this, dude, I'm so good. Okay, so, all right, so what do we do here? This button, it literally just re-updates this content array with a new thing at the very start. Okay, it's just really simple, just to show you guys. As soon as I update the data, React will automatically update the website to look exactly like this. It looks ugly, but hopefully that's good enough. That's use state. There's another thing that you can have. It's called use effect. And also, if you guys have to leave, like, feel free. There's just a lot of stuff that should be gone through. Use effect is another thing that takes in 2 parameters. The first is a function. The second is a dependency array. And what it says is it will keep track of everything inside the dependency array. So if something in the dependency array gets changed, like for example, content, it should do something. Right? So we need to import this here, use effect. Whenever something in the content gets changed, we can maybe alert the page hello. So first time it's going to do this on the load, because when we set the data, it should change. When we click on this, boom, it'll call this function every single time. So it's like a way for you to do side effects. Okay. So this is like the basics of React. It has use state and it has use effect. Yeah.
In your function app, if you can like scroll up.
Yeah.
I don't understand what content and set content does. Like those two.
Yeah. So this is essentially a variable. So in JavaScript, we declare variables with like let.
Yeah.
So imagine we did something like let content equals to that array, right? This is how you would do it with just regular variables. And this works in JavaScript. However, React needs a special variable, and we call this special variable state. Why? Because this is something that we want React to listen to. Whenever there's a change in this, React should know about it. That's why we have the second part called set content. When we want to change the value of content, we don't just do content equals to the new array, right? Because React wants to know whenever this thing is getting updated. So that's why they want us to call their custom function here set content. So if you just look up like use state online, it'll follow all that same syntax, and maybe they can explain a little bit more because I'm really running out of time here. Yeah, so this is use state. I kind of really quickly glanced over use effect. It's just a way for you to listen to things on change. So for example, a good way to use effect is maybe you're on a Facebook profile and then you want to look at another person's Facebook profile. Well, then maybe you have a state here that says like, it's called, I can use my commands here. So maybe you have something like current viewed person or something, right? And then maybe currently it's like listening to my name, okay? And then whenever you change, you need to go to someone else's profile. Maybe their name is Billy Bob or something. Then you should have this use effect here that constantly listens to it. So once the current viewed person changes, maybe you want to make an API call to your backend database to get new information about this guy and stuff. So it's a way to like listen to this kind of stuff. But yeah, this is the basics of use state and use effect. Wow, this was, I had like 50 minutes to cram all of React for people who are intro. So this is a lot of stuff. Yeah, people who have been doing React development for like several years are still not even at like close to good level. So if you guys made it this far, that's really, really cool. But I doubt a lot of you guys really are able to write code quickly in React. But hopefully what I provided you with was not like the syntax code and all that kind of stuff, but really the concepts. And that's what's important, right? The idea that you know why React was made, right? It's based off of these state changes and how state changes and how data changes, and React will react to these changes and all this kind of stuff. So that later when you're actually learning React on your own, you can kind of just glance at the syntax or the tutorials and you're like, okay, I know why it does that. And I know, why it's doing all this stuff. Why do I need, content, set content? You're not going to find like tutorials online that are going to say, okay, why does it need this? Because React needs to hook into the state. They're not going to tell you that. They're just going to give you the code. So that's why I didn't want to give you guys the code, because you guys can find that on your own. I just want to give you guys the concepts. There's actually one other thing that I was asked to cover, which was React Router DOM. And all I can do is tell you guys, let's create a new file. Oops, new file, React Router DOM. Oops. For routing, you're going to use this. Okay. But you're not going to know how to use this. So you guys can find me on campus, ask me on Discord or whatever. I'll be happy to help. Yeah, I'll take questions in a bit, but just really quickly, if you guys are going to ZotHacks, I will be a mentor for it. And you're normally your mentors are assigned to groups, but for ZotHacks, usually I help everyone that I can. So if you guys do have any React related questions, or just CSS or JavaScript or Flask or any questions, feel free to ask me. It doesn't have to be during ZotHacks. You guys can ask me anytime you guys want. You guys can probably find my Discord somewhere on the Hack Discord. My website, shoot, it doesn't actually have my stuff. Okay, but I have an actual website called ryan.dev, and there should have my contact information. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. I love to help anteaters, but I help pretty much everyone I can. I have people from previous hackathons 2-3 years back that still message me for help, and I'm happy to help. One of them actually asked me for help on, she got hired recently for a FANG company, and then she asked me help on her work. But yeah, I'll help with anything except for like CS homework. I'm not gonna give you the solutions. Yeah, other than that, I think that wraps everything up.